Welcome back to another LP Gallery tutorial. This is our part 2 of using text and symbols as patterns into larger text. So we're using smaller text and symbols for this, and we'll start off with the text. So here's an example where you might want to read the text on both. So here we have the word popular, that's a font, and you can see we're kind of doing it in two layers. We have a top layer, which is this, and the bottom layer. So the bottom layer shows through the space as the top layer, and that's what helps create the nice abstract feel to it. So this is kind of like a play on words. So it's popular, and we have the word font in there, so it's a popular font. Now here we have the word impact. So we have the word impact twice, and the second impact, the blue impact, which is on top, acts more as a design. So it takes a while to read it. So it's kind of another word play where they'd have to look real close and actually see the second word. So in this one here, we're going for a couple of words. So the main word says time, and then inside we have after time. So after time acts as a design, but it's still readable. And this side here, we're doing just abstract patterns. We're not trying to read text. We just want a nice pattern. So we're using this word font, and we're applying it through here. So I'm using, of course, a nice rainbow gradient. So both the top and bottom layer have the rainbow gradient. So again, this is copied, pasted into the top layer of text here, and it's just placed on top. So the background shows through. Of course, when you do that, you tile it, and you have the ability to move it around. So you can move it left, right, whatever you like. So the only difference between these three is this one here has a drop shadow on the top layer. So the top text is a drop shadow. And this one here, we've removed the 3D effect from the top layer, and we put an inner shadow. Now remember, an inner shadow can't have a 3D effect. So by putting a 3D effect, we get that nice cut-in effect. So this looks very mechanical. It looks very structured. So you can see that shadows affect the final product. Now here we're just using characters from the keyboard. So here we have 3 dots from the keyboard, dot, 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 and we put a nice rainbow fill on it and got the word stripe, and you can see what we've done here. Now that depends on how you tile it. So we're going to show you how to tile it, and it gives you different effects. Now here we've got metal, so I want this to look like metal. So I've got a couple of semicolons here, and it kind of looks like nice stamped metal. Now here we've got something called machine. I've got the letter H, give it a 3D effect, and I've dropped it into the top layer, and it looks like a rusty machine. So it really emphasizes what I'm saying. Now here's a fun one. This one just uses a question mark, and we put it into here. Kind of looks like a kid's pattern, so it's a lot of fun. Here we're using a caret symbol. Here we're using a bracket symbol. So again, just one character or 2 characters, and you'd be surprised what you get. Now for this one, we're talking about symbols. So here we got a music symbol. Here we got a camping symbol. So we're emphasizing what we're saying with the symbols. So we're talking winter. We got 2 little snowflakes. Here we got travel. I found some travel symbols, put them in there. Here we're talking about lattice. So it's nice metallic, like a lattice structure of a fence, like a wrought iron fence or something. So we're using a symbol like this to give us that. Now in this one here, we're using the same symbol, one bigger, one smaller. And we're trying to give it like a textile pattern. So it kind of looks like a macrame or crocheted kind of textile pattern. Now in this one here is just an example of where we use one symbol to go through all of this to represent something different. So this symbol here, now this one is called light shade, and it's part of a lot of fonts like Arial fonts. And what I've done with that one is I've made it big, put an inner shadow, called this grate, and it looks like it's punched into the grate. Now I've taken the same thing, give it a 3D effect, so it stands out. Now we call it rivets, and it stands out like rivets. So here I've used it as snow, here I've used it as confetti, and here I've used it as rain, and again I've used it as confetti here. And these that you see here, it looks like balloons, are actually this little bomb symbol. So I've turned this little bomb symbol into balloons. We're also going to be showing you how to repurpose some of these things into other things. So I've shown you lots of examples in these 4 slides, but we're only going to create like maybe 1 or 2 examples from each of the slides. Okay, so let's get started. So we're going to start off by creating the readable text. This is where you want to read both words. So we have the word Arial here, and we're going to use the word font to tile on top of that. So it's going to say Arial font. And this one we have the word time. I want to put the word after time in here. But in this one, I don't want it to tile. I want it to stretch. So we're going to do a tile, and we're going to do a stretch. So you're going to notice that we're using 2 different fonts. We're using the Arial black font here, and we're using a thicker font here called Popular, and it works exceptionally well for what we want to do. And so the font you choose plays a part in what you're doing, especially doing text within text, but also the word itself. Now, if we look at time, time is made up of mostly straight letters. Now, if we look over here at Arial, you see we have two A's, and what that creates is a big awkward space between the characters. So remember, when you tile words, they're going to go right across the space too. So you're going to get a lot of broken words, and sometimes it makes it a little more difficult to read. So the font you choose and the word you're working with plays a part in this. So in the case of Arial, where we have these awkward spaces, what would help is to condense the space, bring the letters closer together so that there's less awkward space between the characters. Now, fortunately, in WordArt, and this is a WordArt object, when you condense the character spacing, in WordArt, everything is confined to the box. So it doesn't stretch the box or condense the box. What it does is thicken the letters to fill in the space. So that works to our advantage. So again, when you're using character spaces in a WordArt, it just thickens or thins the letter depending on what you're trying to do. Now, in a regular text box, when you play with the character spacing, it actually moves the letters closer apart or farther apart, but not in WordArt. And again, that's to our advantage. So what we want to do now is decrease the spacing between the characters. So you go to your Home tab, you go to our Font section, and you go right here where it says Character Spacing. You click the drop down, you have some defaults. It starts off with normal, of course, so we can try going to tight. I like to bring it tighter. We'll go to very tight, still not good enough. So I'm going to go to more spacing. Do it myself. Click here, and we get this. It says spacing is normal. That's not what we want. We click the drop down where it says spacing. We go to condense. It's hard to tell you what point size to make it because every font is different in their character spacing. It's something that you do by trial by error. So what I'm going to do is try, let's say, 5 points. Say OK. And you can see what PowerPoint has done is thicken the letters, and it actually brings them closer. I think I'd like to do it a little more, bring them even closer together. Not too close that you can't read them. So let's go back here, go to more spacing. We'll try 10. And again, this is different for every font. Okay, and I think that looks pretty good. We don't want them too close together where you can't read the individual characters, but we do want them close together. Now you can see that PowerPoint has made the letters thicker, and that's going to help us when the words tile right across. So I'm happy with the character spacing. The next thing to do is to duplicate this text. That's going to be our top text, and the word font is going to be pasted into that. Okay, now remember from part 1 that there's 2 ways to copy and paste here. If we highlight the words in the box themselves and copy that, you're going to get one result. If we click on the box itself, you're going to get a second result. So again, I'm going to just refresh you on that. I'm going to double click, highlight the text, copy that, click in here, go to text, picture, texture, clipboard, tile, and you're going to get that. Okay, let me put an outline so you can see it. Okay, so remember that when you're using a font that has a solid fill but no outline, it's going to tile it, but you're going to get these really awkward spaces. It's just a bizarre nature of PowerPoint. Now, if we put an outline on this and do the same thing, copy, clipboard, tile, we're going to get a repeated pattern as we should. But you'll notice that the font is this size, not this size. And part of the problem with working with WordArt and copying and pasting text within text is that PowerPoint remembers the original size of the word before it was converted into WordArt. So whenever you take a text box and convert it into WordArt, it always makes it bigger. So it remembers the original size. So if you want the text to be the actual original size, then you have to click on the box itself. Now I'm going to remove the line. We don't need the line. Now, if I click on the box, PowerPoint will take this whole thing. So if I click on this and copy it, and click in here, clipboard, tile, takes the whole thing. You can see that. Okay, so we want to get used to clicking on the box rather than clicking the text within the box unless you want it small. Okay, so I'm kind of happy with this. So now I can just put it on top and we get something that looks like that. And it looks pretty good. Now you can see with the 3D effect, since both texts have a 3D effect, even though you don't get a blue fill here, you're still getting the same 3D effect as this one here. So when they both have the same 3D effect and you put them on top, it really looks good. You'll notice that by having a 3D effect on both text, and the 3D effect is still on this text, even though it's not blue, it's still there. So when you have the same 3D effect, you'll notice that this top layer, the words seem to be wrapping around the bottom text. So it looks quite natural. It looks more realistic. one of the problems with tiling words across like that is that they become run-on words. It's very hard to read them, so it would be nice to have a space between the words. If I just go in here and add a space and highlight the text this way, copy and paste it into here, PowerPoint won't recognize the space in the word art object. So what I have to do again is click on the box itself. But as I click spaces in here, you'll notice that the words compress. So you got to be careful with that. So if I add one space, click on the box, PowerPoint will keep that. So we're going to copy that. We're going to click here, go to text, clipboard, tile, and you have the space. Okay, so we have character spacing. So you can add spaces, but you got to click on the box, not the text itself. Now it sure be nice to have line spacing also. So we have space vertically between the words. Now we can do that here. We can click in here and we can hit an enter. But of course, if you hit the enter, it's going to squish the text smaller again. And then you can highlight the enter space and you can go to your font right here to your font size and you can decrease the size. But that gets to be a hassle. You can only decrease it to a certain size. I'm going to show you an easy way to do this where you can add a character space and a line spacing without having to squish your text together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that space and I'll just drop it down here. So I'm actually going to grab a rectangle, draw a little rectangle like this, and I'm going to get rid of the fill. And this is going to be our spacing. So we're going to decide how much spacing we want. And my recommendation is to do it from the bottom, top like this. So we're doing the top spacing here. Now you could do it the other way, like this, if you want. But I like to do it at the top so that there's a little bit of spacing at the top here. So the words don't come right to the top. There's just a little bit of spacing. So I'm going to decide how much spacing I want. How much spacing do I want at the top? How much spacing do I want to the right? Okay, so I think I like that. I'm going to remove the line. Now I'm going to select both of these. Now remember, when you're copying and pasting this into the text, you're actually pasting a picture. So the rectangle in the background here just acts as an empty rectangle, so it gives us our space. So we copy that. We're going to click here, go to text options, clipboard, and we're going to tile that. And now you've got both character spacing and line spacing. The next thing to talk about is the alignment. So I'm going to click in here, go to my text options again. Now, if you're finding it hard to read the text here, you can always change the alignment. So the alignment defaults to the top left, so it starts here. But if you're not happy with that, you can try top, you can try center, and you can try bottom right. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. So you just play with alignment until you get to read most of the text in there. That looks pretty good even like that. Okay, so alignment helps when you want to read the text, if you have awkward spaces like we still have here. So sometimes alignment will help you make the words more readable. The next thing to talk about are shadows. You have two kinds of shadows, drop shadows and inner shadows, and they are very different. So I'm going to take a duplicate of this and I'm going to apply a drop shadow to it. So I'm going to click on the top layer there, go to my text options, go to my effects, and just apply a drop shadow. And you get a drop shadow that's on the top layer, so you can see the shadows around. Shadow goes under each word, but it also goes around the big letter space too. So you can see the shadow is dropped under each word here, but it's also part of the big letter space here too. Okay, that looks pretty good and makes it a little more readable. Now let's duplicate that. And let's do an inner shadow. Now, an inner shadow does not work with a 3D effect. So if I click here, go to my text options, go to my effects, and apply an inner shadow, all it does is remove the drop shadow, but you don't see anything. It's like there's nothing there at all. Again, an inner shadow does not work with a 3D effect. Remember, the top layer has a 3D effect. So we have to remove our 3D effects. We're going to go here, going to remove the 3D effect, and you get that. So the inner shadow always makes the top layer look like it's cut into the bottom layer. And what I'm going to probably do is just take some of the shadow down a bit, make it a little more readable. It's a little too strong there. because it's so small, and we get something like that. So here you can see the word font looks like it's cut into the background. In the drop shadow, you can see the word font looks like it's raised off the background text. And here with the inner shadow, it looks like it's cut into the background text. So a couple interesting effects you can add to your top layer. Now before we leave this one here, if you're not happy with the way the text is lining up, you've tried the left, right, the center, and all that, you could still do your alignments manually. So you still have your offsets. If you're not happy the way the text is reading, you can just go to your offsets. Of course, the X offset moves left or right, and the Y offset moves up or down. So let's say I want to bring the font and line it up more with the beginning of the R. So I would just spin down and move it there. So again, you can play with your alignments, or you can work with your offsets to line your text a little better. Now, one thing you have to be aware of when you're doing this is you have to watch your shape options and your text options. Because when you deselect and you go back, you'll notice that you're automatically sent back to the shape options. And the shape options has a lot of the options that the text options do. So if you're not paying attention, you're going to start working in here, and you're working with your shape, not with the text that's in the shape. So you got to watch for that. That's just something PowerPoint does. It defaults to the shape options. So you got to remember to go back to your text options. So if something's not working for you and you can't understand it, just look up here because you're probably in the wrong option. Okay, now let's work with our time after time text. Now, I like to bring the characters closer together, not too close that you can't read the word, but still bring them a little closer together, reduce that space. So I'm going to go back to my character spacing, and we'll just try the defaults. I'll try tight. No, I'll try very tight. That works pretty good. Okay, so you don't want to bring them so close together that you can't read the individual characters. That looks pretty good. Now we have to duplicate this for our top text. Okay, so there it is. There's your bottom text. Here's your top text. I find that if you're going to be pasting 2 or 3 words into the top layer, that usually helps to have a font that's quite different. Okay, I still want to use a thicker font, but I don't want it to be so straight like this one, Arial Black, or like Popular font. Okay, so I'm going to change the font. I'm going to go to my font list. I think I'm going to try something like Cooper Black. I think that's pretty good. It's still a very thick font, but it's a more curved font. It has like serifs in there. I think that will look a little better than just having a straight font within a straight font. The next thing is I want to set this after time up in a certain area in the top text. So I see the bulk of the area of the text is right about here. So that would look pretty good there. Now you know that when we do this, we copy and paste, we're only going to get 2 choices, either a tile or a stretch. Now I don't want this text to stretch all the way across, and I certainly don't want it to tile. I just want it in this area where I've indicated, right there. So the first thing I'm going to do is stretch it out to make it a little bigger. So I'm going to bring it to the front, and I'm going to just kind of place it here, and I'm going to stretch the text out the way I think I like it. Something like that looks pretty good. I like that. But I've got this big awkward line space between the 2 words, and I don't really like that. I like to reduce that line spacing. Now to do that, we go to our paragraph options here. Here's our line spacing, and the default is 1 line spacing. We're going to go to our line spacing option that brings up this box, and we're looking for this right here, spacing. Now the default is single line spacing. We don't want that, so I'm going to click here, and I'm going to go to exactly. Now, again, every font is different, so you're going to have to play with your fonts to get the kind of spacing you want. Now, in this particular case, it's telling me the line spacing is 21.6 points. So what I'm going to do is reduce that. So how much do I reduce it? Well, I have to play with it to find out. I'll just try 15 point. Say OK. And I think it looks pretty good. Now, remember that when you reduce character spacing, or in this case, line spacing, it really doesn't bring them close together. It stretches them out. So in this case, it vertically stretched them out, which is even better than what it was before. So now the text is stretched out. It's a little bit bigger. That looks pretty good. Now the question is, how am I going to get it positioned right here? So once again, as you know, either the text will tile in here or it will stretch in here. I really can't position it that way. what I have to do is what we've already done. We're going to take a rectangle like this, and we're going to draw a rectangle, the height and width of the top text like this. I'm going to remove the fill. And then what I'm going to do is position the text where I think I'd like it. So I like it about here. And I think I'm going to also change the alignment. I'm going to align it to the right so it looks more like that. Okay, so I think I like the bulk of it here. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to use this rectangle and the text together. I'm going to copy them both together so they will be one piece. And then I'm going to paste it into this top layer that says time. Now remember, when you're copying and pasting, you're just copying and pasting a picture. So PowerPoint will take the rectangle and the text as one piece and just paste it in there. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to hold my text and I'm going to just move it off to make sure I got them. There we go. So there it is. I have them both. It looks pretty good. Now, obviously, I don't need the outline in the rectangle, so I'm going to click on the rectangle, go no line, and now all I have to do is select them. I'm going to copy that and paste it. Now it's going to fit in there perfectly because it's now the same size as this word time. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to select this. We have to copy it. We're going to click on the text box here, and we're going to go to text options. We're going to go to picture, texture, clipboard, and actually I am going to tile it. Okay, now to see this better, we'll put an outline on it so you can actually see it. Okay, now we've got time after time. Let's put that on top here, and you can see what we got, time after time. Now here's the beauty. Now remember, when you tile it, remember what we just pasted in is the same height and width, so it's not going to really move that much. So we don't have to worry about it stretching all the way to the edges. It's not going to do that. But now I can play with the offsets. By tiling this, I can move this around to get what I want, time after time. Now, obviously, if I keep doing this, it's going to repeat again, so you have to watch for that. And you just work that whichever way you like. So left, right, back, forth, top, bottom. Okay, that looks pretty good. So again, we're using the empty rectangle to give us the height and width of what we need, and we copy and paste it with the text, and we can position it anywhere we want. Now, of course, we can add drop shadows and inner shadows, so let's do that. Let's make a duplicate of that. Okay, let's click on the top text. Let's go to text options, effects. Let's see what a drop shadow looks like. That looks pretty good. So the drop shadow makes the top text look like it's lifted off the bottom text. Now let's try the inner shadow. And again, with an inner shadow, you can't have a 3D effect. So let's go to text options. We're going to have to remove the 3D effect. And then we can go to our inner shadow. And we get that. So there you go. So you have drop shadow and inner shadow. Of course, the next thing you have to do is you have to line up the text to make sure they're perfectly on top of each other. So you have to select them, go to your format, align center, and align middle. Now I've got an outline on the top text, and you can make the outline whatever color you like. You can make it as big as you like, or you can remove it. So if you don't want an outline, just remove it. But before you remove it, you have to make sure you line them up perfectly. Okay, so we've used two words, like we see here. We used the word font on top, so it says Arial font. And we use three words where it says time after time. How about we use the same repeated word? So we're going to have time and then repeated time. And I'll show you an interesting effect you can do with that. So let me take this, and we're going to use the word time again. So we're going to backspace this out. We just want the word time. And I'm going to just move it over here. Let's take this and let's just duplicate it, get it out of the way. So we're going to have the word time into time itself. Now I'm going to choose a different font for this one. I don't want a thick font. I want something a little bit thinner. So I'm going to go through my fonts. I think I'm going to use this one called Bradley Hand. Okay, it's a very thin, kind of a scratchy font. And I think I'm going to make it bold. Okay, now I'm going to take this. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to click in here, go to my text options, go to my clipboard, and I want this to stretch. I don't want it to tile. I want it to stretch. I'm going to go in clipboard, and I get something like that. Now, it looks pretty good, but what I'd like to have is this effect here. I want an inner shadow, so it looks like it's kind of scratched in there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go to my text options, go to my effects, And remember, you got to remove the bevel. You can't have a 3D effect with an inner shadow. So we get rid of the 3D effect. Then we go to our shadows and we do the inner shadow, and you get something like that. And it looks like the word time here in yellow is being scratched into the blue background, when in fact it's the other way around. The yellow text is actually on top. Now you can try any kind of font that you like. Now I think if you make them different, they look better. So here we have a nice sans serif font. That's the popular font. It's thick, it's sans serif. So how about we go for a serif font? So I'm going to click on that, go to my fonts. Let's try something like an Adobe font. I have Adobe fonts, but we're just looking for a serif font. So here we got a nice serif font, and the serif just means you have these, what we call shoulders and feet. And we're going to click on that. We're going to copy that. I'm going to click in here, go to text options, clipboard, and you get something like that. So again, it looks like the top blue layer is being ripped apart, revealing the yellow layer underneath. Here we have 2 words used, here we have 3 words used, and here we just have a repeated word. All give you a pretty nice design pattern on your text. Okay, so that's making text within text where you want to read it. Now we're going to go and make text within text where we're just using the top layer or the top text strictly as an abstract pattern. So we're going to use the same words you've been using so far, and it doesn't really matter what words you use. It doesn't even matter what font you use for this abstract pattern, because any font will work. Now we're going to use this text here at that size, and we're going to copy and paste it in here and turn it into a pattern. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to copy it. Remember, you got to click on the border, copy it, click in here, text options, clipboard, and we want to tile it. Now what's going to make the pattern, of course, is the mirror type. So right now we can read each word there. So what we need to do is go to our mirror type and change that. So we can try horizontal, and that flips it, makes it a little bit less readable. Now we go to vertical, does kind of the same thing, and we can go to both. So we got horizontal and vertical flip or mirrored, and it becomes less readable, but it's still readable. One of the reasons you can still see that there's letters in here is that you can see the line right here. There's a space between each word. So there's a space vertically and a space horizontally. That isolates each word and it makes it a little more readable. And we don't want that space. We want to get rid of that space. I'm going to show you why that space happens. So let's take this. I'm going to just duplicate that. And I'm going to make this bigger. Okay, now if we take a look at this, we can see our bounding box right here. Now if we look at the letters F and a T, they're all on the same line. But if you look at the O, it's a teeny bit higher. It goes a little bit above them and a little bit below them. And you can see that little trap space right down here and at the top. And that's what you're seeing here. Now, we don't want that line. If we get rid of those lines, then the pattern would be very solid and smooth all the way through. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of that space. Now, we're going to do that by cutting it. So I'm going to grab a rectangle, and I'm going to just cut a little bit like this. Pull like that. And I'm going to cut down here. And I'm also going to cut the edges. You can see that if you look here where the F's are right here, when they're flipped, you can see that there's still a line there. And that's just part of what PowerPoint does when it mirrors text. It actually puts a little space in there. So we got rid of that. So we're going to slice that off. And we're going to slice right here. So we're going to slice all the edges. And when we do that, this is no longer going to be text. It's going to be a shape. And each edge is flat and sharp. So that means that when they mirror, they will mirror seamlessly. So we're going to highlight this, make sure we get them all. And we're going to go to Format, Merge Shape. We're going to go to Subtract. Okay, now you can see that it's cut here, it's flat there. That's exactly what we want. Okay, I'm going to make it smaller, about the same size as the other one. And I think what I'm going to do is just duplicate this right here so you can actually make a comparison and see the difference. I'm going to click on the top layer, make sure you got the top layer there. Go to Text Options, Clipboard, and we're going to Tile. Okay, we got our both on, so there it is. Now, if you make a comparison to this, you can see that all this is seamless. Okay, we have basically just lines and shapes now, and it's really hard to make out the individual letters. Now, you know that that's an N because you can see it here, but most people looking at that would not know these were letters. They would just think of them as just patterns. So that's what we're going to do. You cut the letters. You're going to have to do that with any word you use. You're going to have to cut all sides just a little bit to flatten them out, and they will tile perfectly like this. So again, I'm going to duplicate this and we'll just add some shadows. Okay, so this one here, we'll make it a drop shadow. So we'll click here, go to text, effects, just put a drop shadow, and it looks pretty good. And again, we're going to click here, and as always, we're going to put an inner shadow on that one, but you have to remove the formatting. So we got to remove the bevel. So go here, no bevel, go here, and we go inner shadow. I'm going to actually take it down a bit. It's a little too strong. So something like that looks pretty good. With the inner shadow, it looks like a cutout pattern. So it looks more cutout, looks more mechanical. So again, 3 versions of the same thing. Now, I've got the rainbow one here because I like doing this with rainbow fonts too. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to just make that a little bit bigger, and we're going to kind of do the same thing on the rainbow one. So I'm going to copy that, click here, go to text, clipboard, tile, and we get that. I kind of really like the rainbow. If you look right here, you can see we have the same problem where they don't touch, so we have to cut that too. So I'm going to make a duplicate of that one, and I'm going to grab a rectangle and just do a little slicing and dicing. And we're going to select that, and we're going to subtract that. We're going to copy that, click here, and we tile it. Let's see, let's make it, let's do both on those. Okay, looks good. So look at the pattern here. I really like that. Between the background and the foreground, we get a nice mix of colors. Now, the thing about using gradients is that if you just change the pattern of the gradient, that will change how this looks. So right now I've got the gradient here going from purple to red. So what if I were to change it going up? So we've got a red to purple. It's going vertically. Okay, before it was going horizontally, now it's going vertically. So let's copy that, click in here, and do that. And you can see it looks like an entirely different pattern, but it's the same one. It's just that the gradient has changed a different direction. That's why I like working with gradients, because I think you can make a little more variety in them with less effort. Let me get rid of that, and then we get rid of that. I'm going to show you that you can use any font you want. It doesn't really matter. So here we use the sans serif font, a very thick font. Let's try something different. Let's maybe try like a script font. So let's go down, let's see. How about brush script? That looks pretty good. I might bring the letters a little closer together. I think that way. Now remember, we're not trying to read it, so we could bring the letters closer together. Makes more of an abstract shape when you do that. Now again, we're going to have to cut this so they're tiled. So we're going to cut that. So just a little bit, just so they're flat on top and on the bottom. And we're going to do the sides. So we got to flatten everything. And we're going to cut there. And it's up to you how much you want to cut. But you do want to cut all edges kind of square. And we're going to take that, we're going to subtract, and what we're going to do is just make it a little bit smaller, and we'll do the same thing. Copy, click in here, tile, and you get quite a wild pattern there. It's kind of like a very scribbly little pattern. Now, if we were to do that one in here, let's take that, look at the gradient, go here, go to shape, I'll go to look at the gradient. We get that. We're going to copy that, put it in here. And again, you get some wild patterns here. You can use any font you want for this, and you can use any word you want. I would just make sure the pasted word is not too long, and try to use all caps because it works a lot easier, especially when you're doing the cutting here. It's a lot easier if they're all caps. I think on this nice gradient one here, I think I'm going to put an inner shadow on that and see what that looks like. We're going to click here, go to our effects, we've got to turn our 3D off, and we've got to put an inner shadow, and we get something like that. So you can see when you have the gradients, these shadows and inner shadows, particularly the inner shadows, look really well in gradients. You have 2 gradient patterns happening there. Now let me just take that down a bit, and it looks pretty wild. Really, really quite nice. So again, it doesn't matter what font you use, just keep them all caps, doesn't matter what word you use. Now how about if we just use a single letter? So let's try that. So let me take this, and let me just use the letter F. And again, it doesn't matter what letter you use, we'll just take that. Okay, so I'm going to copy that, click in here, and tile. It looks really good. It's a nice stiff geometric pattern, but it's still quite nice. But you see those little lines? And that's because, again, we have to cut, okay? So we just got to do a little bit of slicing, just a little bit, again, on all four sides. Subtract, okay, we'll make it smaller, and do that again. And you get something like that. Looks pretty neat. Let's try it on here. Let's try it on the inner shadow. And you get something like that. Again, something very mechanical. Looks really quite interesting here. Almost looks machine-like. Quite nice. And again, you could do that with any letter you wanted, and you're using any font you want. So let's try that. Maybe we'll just change the font to something else. Let's go back to brush script, okay? And we'll do the same thing. We'll just use the letter F. We'll stretch it out. I like to stretch it out when I'm cutting to make sure I'm doing a good job on it. And we'll just slice it there. We'll just slice it there. And same thing, we'll slice a bit here. And we'll slice a bit there. We'll make it smaller. We'll copy that. And tile that. And another really wild pattern. Let's try that in here. And look at that, pretty neat. And let's make that a nice gradient, and we'll try that in here. And you get something wild like that. So the next thing to show you is how to apply pattern text as a special effect on a word. So on this slide, we're going to show you how to use pattern text as a special effect to apply to a word to really help emphasize that word. So we have a word metal here. It has a nice metallic gradient to it. It has a 3D bevel effect to it. Kind of looks like metal, but we can make it look more like metal. We have the letter I here. It's a serif font. It has the same metallic color, and it has a 3D bevel on that. Now what I like to do is copy and paste that and put it into here. So that will make it look more like stamped metal. Stamped metal is very common, particularly if it's like a box-like structure that contains things. So that's what we want to do. We want to stamp this metal and make it look really, really metallic. Look like it's really 3D and solid. So I'm going to have to duplicate this. This is our bottom layer, or bottom text. So we have to duplicate it. And we're going to take that. We're going to copy it. We're going to click in here. Go to text. So we're going to picture and texture. And we're going to tile that. And you get something like that. Now I'm going to put a solid line on it. I'll just make it a gray line. Something like that. And we'll put it back. And we get something like that. So you can see we have like a stamp pattern on this. So it really kind of looks a little more like metal. Looks like something more solid. The next thing to do is really make that stamp pattern stand out. So what I want to do is remove the 3D bevel on it and make it an inner shadow. Because if you make it an inner shadow, it will look like it's cut into or recessed into the metal. So I'm going to click here, go to my text, go to my effects. I'm going to remove the bevel, and I'm going to put an inner shadow. And we get something like that. So now if we look at that, you can see that it really looks like solid stamped metal. Now we could have cut the edges off here and brought them close together, but I think I like that. I don't think we need to cut anything here. I think it looks pretty good. Now with this word cracks, we obviously want to crack that up, make all kinds of little cracks on it. So it's going to look kind of like a blue piece of ceramic that's got a lot of these tiny, tiny little fractures on it. So again, we have blue text. It's kind of a rounded font, which really emphasizes what we're trying to say. And it has a little bit of a 3D bevel. Now the text we're using here is Bradley Hand. Now Bradley Hand text is a very jagged font like that, and it goes from thick to thin, and that will really help creating that illusion of cracks. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is we have to cut this. So we want the pattern to be fairly seamless. So we're going to go up here to a rectangle. We're going to do a little bit of slicing and dicing. And we've got to be careful because it's a very thin font. So we do that there. We do a little bit here, and a little bit here, and a little bit there. We select all that, and we subtract. and we get that. Okay, now the fill I'm going to use for this is actually one of our textured fills. Now remember, this is a shape, so we have to go to Shape Options and Picture Texture. Click there, and we want this one here. That's the default. We'll just take that one. Looks pretty good, and I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so next thing is we have to obviously make a duplicate. Okay, that's our back text. This is our front text. So we're going to copy this. We're going to put it in here. Go to Text Options and Picture Texture, Clipboard. I'm going to tile it. I'll give it a little bit of an outline just so you can see it. I'll just take that down a bit. Okay, now we put this back up here. It looks a little bit like it's got cracks, but they really don't stand out that much. But we can make these cracks look a little more three-dimensional. So what we have to do is the same as what we did here. We have to remove the top bevel and put an inner shadow. So let's do that. So we go to our Text Options. We're going to go to our Effects. We need to get rid of the bevel. And we're going to go to our inner shadow. And we get that. Now we're going to take that down a bit. It's a bit big. You can see that this word looks like it's really cracked up. So it actually looks like maybe blue ceramic tile of some type that's really cracked up. And of course you can play with your mirror types. So we have both, but you can go to horizontal or vertical, whatever you like. And you can offset it if you need to offset them. If the pattern's too obvious, you can always offset it. But I think that looks really, really good. Now with this word candle, what I like to do is have some nice wax dripping down the candle to really emphasize it. So how do we do that? It's pretty easy. So I have a letter T here, and I'm using a font called No Other Name. Now this is a very casual, loose font, and you can see that the way it looks like with this letter T, we have a long stem that goes down, and you can see that the stem is kind of crooked and then goes a little bit thick, a little bit thin. And what does that look like? Well, it looks like something really dripping. So that's a perfect letter to use for what we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple more letters. So I'm going to add another T, and then I'm going to add maybe a J, maybe another T, and maybe a letter I, and maybe a couple more T's. I'm going to stretch it out, and we get something that looks like that. So these are all going to kind of look like drips coming down. I'm using a color that goes from darker red to a lighter red. So because as the wax comes down, it gets a little bit lighter. I want to give that impression. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to duplicate it. Put it here. And what we want to do, obviously, is copy that and put it in there. Now, when you're using text for this, like in this case, we're using it for drips, letters J and I and different letters, they don't all behave the same. Every font is different. So you may find a very casual, loose font, and you might want to try this. You may not have the same font I have, but you may try like letter J and find that it actually drops really low down here. So again, every font is different. It's just something that you have to play with. You can do this by going to your shapes and cutting it and trying to make it into that kind of waxy, dripping shape. But a lot of your fonts already have patterns that are very similar to that. That's something I do a lot. I'm trying to always find the easiest way to do things. Okay, that looks pretty good. So what I want to do now is I want to stretch it down like this. What I don't want is a vertical tile. I want more of a horizontal. If I make this taller than the candle itself, it can't flip vertically, even if we accidentally set it that way. Now, what I don't need is this top part here, and I want to cut it flat. So I'm going to grab my rectangle, about like that, and we're going to cut that, and we get something like that. So again, we got nice dark red here, lighter red to the bottom. And I'm going to just kind of put it here, see how that looks. Maybe I'll stretch it down a bit more. And it looks pretty good. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that. Click in here. Go to my text options again. Paste picture, texture, clipboard. And we're going to tile that. I'll give it just a little bit of an outline so you can see it. Now let's put it on the top of the text. Now you can see it looks like nice dripping wax. But we're not done yet. Now let me get rid of that outline. The outline just kind of kills it a bit. Now what would really make this stand out as dripping wax is if we make the wax a little bit lighter. So when wax drips down in candle, it tends to be a little bit lighter as it goes down. In order to do that, all I'm going to do is put an inner shadow on that. So let's go to our text options. And let's go to our effects. Now remember, the top layer has a 3D effect on it, and an inner shadow does not work with a bevel effect. So we have to remove the bevel. And that looks kind of flat, no problem. Now we go to our shadow. We go to our inner shadow. That's kind of dark, not what we want. So we change the shadow to white. And when you do that, you get something that really looks like it's dripping wax. And all it is a series of letters. Now what really will make this stand out is we got to put some wicks on this. What's a candle without wicks? So let's use this. We're going to cut it. We don't need that. We don't need the bottom here. We just want little wicks like that. So we got to click on the shape there. We got to click on this. We got to click on that. Go to merge, subtract, and we only need one. So we're going to cut the rest out. Click on the red. Click on that. Subtract that. There it is. Now all we have to do is create a bunch of duplicates. There's one there. And just duplicate them across. And there's your candle. Now you can imagine if you're doing like a birthday type slideshow, you could spell the person's name and then do something like that. It'd be fantastic and very easy to do. Now the last one we're going to look at is this word called pattern. Now you can see it's very subtle. All it has is horizontal and vertical lines going different ways. It's subtle, but it's quite interesting. So let's take a look at this. I've already got this one complete, so I'm going to just show you what I've got here. So we have the bottom text and the top text. I'm using this word font to paste it to here. Now again, you could use any word. You can use a letter, whatever you want. The point is that we've got lines going two different ways. So if I click here, go to text, you can see that we have this one going horizontally. If I click here, you can see that this one's going vertically. That's all it is. So you copy and paste that into here, and then offset it, do whatever you like, and then you just put it on top, and you got patterns going two different directions. Again, it's subtle, but it's very, very effective. You can try a lot of different patterns, but I find the lines seem to work the best. Okay, so now we start working with symbols. Symbols are easy to use. Generally, you're only using one, and they make a quick abstract pattern. But again, you still want to slice and dice them, so you don't want the image of the symbol to be fairly obvious. So like the text, we got to do a little bit of cutting here. Okay, so here we have just an ampersand symbol, and I'm going to convert it into a word art. So go to Format, Text Effect, Transform, Word Art. Again, we want the ability to stretch this whatever size you want, so that's why you need a word art. And I'm going to make a duplicate of this. Leave the original, make a duplicate, go to my text options, and I think I'll make it a yellow like we've been using. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to just show you again the difference between cutting and not cutting. So we're going to copy that. We're going to put it here, text, clipboard, and we tile. Looks pretty good, pretty fancy, but you can see it's an ampersand, and even though it looks fancy, it's pretty obvious what it is. So I don't want it to be that obvious. So we're going to stretch it out a bit so we can see what we're doing. Grab a rectangle and start slicing. Now how much you want to slice is up to you. You can slice down here, up to here. You just want to have the flat edges. So on all sides you want flat edges. And the flat edges are necessary so that the tile's smooth. Okay, so we make this smaller. Now we copy that, and we'll put it in this one. And we tile. Okay, so now if you make a comparison between that and that, so you can see that these are more seamless and they make a better abstract pattern. Now we got little bits like this over here, which comes from here. And if you didn't want those, well, you would just slice them off. And you get something like that. Now we'll do the same here. And we want to do a little rainbow pattern here too. So once again, I got to look at that, click here, go to my shape, look at the gradient, and we'll copy that. And we'll tile that. So we get something like that. So again, symbols make very easy, quick patterns because basically you're only using one, but you're still slicing and dicing. Okay, let's try another symbol. Let's get rid of that. Let's duplicate this one. And let's see, let's highlight this. Let's go to Insert, Symbol. Why not use the omega symbol that PowerPoint uses right here? So let's go there. And you'll probably find it under your fonts. I don't think you'll find it on your Wingdings. You'll probably have to go to your fonts. So I'm going to go just to an Arial Black font. I always go to Arial Black. It's one of my favorite fonts. So I'll just go there and we'll scroll down until we find it. And there it is. Insert, close, and we have that. And once again, let's go and make that a yellow color. Looks pretty good. Now once again, I'm going to show you the difference between cutting and not cutting. So we're going to copy, go in here, text, clipboard, tile, and of course we got both going on as the mirror. Now it looks pretty good, but you can see the lines between them, they're not really seamless and they look like an omega symbol. So that's not what we want. Okay, so we want it to be seamless. So we're going to make it big, and once again we're going to go and do a little bit of cutting. So cut a little bit from the top, cut a little bit from the bottom, slice a little bit here, and slice a little bit there. And I'll make it a little bit smaller. We'll copy that, go here, text, clipboard, tile. Now, if you compare this to that, you can see that we have a better seamless pattern, and it really doesn't look like the omega symbol. It's a really interesting pattern. It looks quite nice, but it doesn't look like the omega symbol. So that's why we do the slicing and dicing, so that it becomes seamless patterns, and usually the original image of what they were disappears. And we'll try that one. Looks pretty good. That looks really nice. And of course, let's make that a gradient. And we'll copy that and put it into here. And tile. Ooh, that looks really nice. I really love working with the gradients because they really make a very colorful pattern. Okay, so let's do one more. Let's get rid of that. Let's highlight the text. Let's go to Insert, Symbol, and let's go to Wingdings. Let's see. I'm going to go to Wingdings 2. Let's try Wingdings 2, so we got there. I think I'm going to take this one right here. Kind of like that. It looks pretty good. I think that'll make a really good pattern. Let's go to Insert. Let's close. We're going to highlight this, and we're going to make it a little bit bolder so it stands out. Let's just make that yellow. Again, I'll repeat that. Copy, put it in here. Okay, you get that. Looks pretty good. You can see that they're not touching, and the symbol pattern becomes pretty obvious. So what you got to do, we got to do a little bit of slicing and dicing. We're going to grab a rectangle and just cut again. And of course, you decide how much you want to cut. Every time you make a cut, it makes a difference. So, and we're going to subtract. Take it back down a bit. Copy that, click here, tile. If you look at this, you can see they're very seamless. They really flow into each other. On this top one, we have lots of breaks. Here, there is no breaks. They're absolutely seamless, almost like a Celtic pattern. Okay, let's click here, and let's do the clipboard. Let's tile that one, and you got that. And of course, I like my gradients, so got to put a gradient in that. Copy that, click here. And we get something that looks like that. Okay, so you kind of get the idea of symbols again. You can use whatever symbol you want. You just got to do a little bit of slicing and dicing of the edges to flatten all the edges out to do these great effects. Now in our final project here, we're going to show you how to repurpose your symbols. So here we have a nice little art piece here. It's got the word celebrate, and you can see within the letters we have streamers, we have confetti coming off the letters, we even have balloons. And these are the symbols we're using for that. We're using the ampersand to represent the streamers. We're using the light shade symbol to represent the confetti. And this little bomb character here, we're using to represent the balloons. So again, it's a matter of showing you how to repurpose what you already have so you don't have to build it from scratch. So we're going to stick to the word celebrate and create something very similar to this. Now, so far, we've been working with just two texts. We have a bottom text and a top text. Now, we're going to introduce another one. We'll have a bottom, a middle, and a top. what that gives us is more flexibility in how we handle these symbols. It's not any harder, just gives you a little more flexibility, makes the work a little more interesting if you can control things individually. Okay, now the first thing we have to do is we have to convert all our symbols into word art. Again, we need the flexibility to be able to stretch them to whatever size we like. So I'm going to select them all, go to Format, Text Effect, Transform, and just use the top one there. Now, the little bomb here kind of got a little flattened out, so we just got to kind of stretch it out, get it back to its round shape. That looks pretty good. Okay, so we're going to start off with the ampersand symbol, and that's going to be our nice little ribbon. So let me just make a copy of it. I always make a copy in case we mess it up. Okay, now what I like with this one, of course, is to be a rainbow color. So I'm going to click here, look at the rainbow, click here, go to our text again, put a gradient, and we get the rainbow. Okay, now in this one here, we don't need to do any slicing or dicing. I actually want this to be free-flowing so it actually looks like a streamer. So we don't want to cut the streamer short. Now what I like to do is rotate this so it doesn't look like an ampersand symbol. Something like that. Looks pretty good. And I'm going to duplicate this. And maybe I'll flip it the other way. So we have something kind of going a little bit on that line. So it looks a little bit wavy. Okay, now I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy it. Okay, now this is going to represent our bottom, so I need to make a duplicate. And now I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to go to my text, and of course we're going to go to Picture, Texture, Clipboard, and we're going to Tile. And I'll just put a little outline on it, just so you can see what we're doing. Put a thin outline, and we'll put it on top, and you can see what we have here. Okay, now you can play with your mirror types. You can try horizontal, vertical, and you just keep playing until you get what you want. And then you can always move the offsets. That looks pretty good. So it looks like we got a bunch of free-flowing streamers. So the next thing we're going to do is work on our confetti. We're going to take this nice light shade symbol. We'll just duplicate that here. We'll kind of stretch it out a bit. And I'd like to give it a nice rainbow color. Go to text, go to gradient, and we get a rainbow. And I want to duplicate that, and maybe we'll just kind of flip it the other way. Just kind of offset it maybe a bit, maybe just kind of rotate it a bit. A little bit offset so they're not so perfect. I want the streamers to be controlled by themselves, and I want the confetti to be controlled by themselves. Now what I want to do is actually paste the confetti into the shape itself. Okay, so not in the text, but into the shape itself. But I don't want the confetti to fill up the whole rectangular shape, because if you do that, it makes the text a little harder to read. So what I want to do is I'm going to copy the confetti, and I'm going to make another duplicate of the celebrate word. I'm going to paste it into the text. So it will fill in the text, and then I'm going to take that confetti text, I'm going to copy it and paste it into the shape. So when I paste it into the shape, it will have the shape of the letters, but because it's going to be tiled, I can offset it and it will look like this. It'll look like it's offsetting the letters. So again, if I fill the whole rectangular shape with the confetti, it'll make the letters harder to read. So I don't want to do that. I think this looks better where the confetti seems to be flying off the letters. Looks more like something that's being thrown. So that's what I want to do. Okay, so I'm going to take this one. I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to select my confetti here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to click in here, go to my text, clipboard, and we'll tile that. Okay, we're going to get rid of the outline. Okay, so you kind of see what we have here. Now again, you can change their horizontal, vertical. If you see too much of a pattern, you can of course shift this around, but I think that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Now what I like to do is copy that. I'm going to paste it into the background of the streamer text. Okay, so let me just move it here. So I'm copying that. So let me grab the streamer text. I'm going to paste it actually as a background into here. So this is copied. Let me do it again. Copy. I'm going to click here. Now again, I'm pasting it into the shape rectangle, but because it's got the letter shapes, it'll be perfectly aligned to this. So I'm going to go to my shape, picture and texture, clipboard, and I want to tile it. Okay. Now you can see it's filling the letters, right? Now I don't want it to fill the letters. I want to offset it. So I'm going to move the X offset so it comes a little bit off and we get something like that. So it looks like it's flowing off the letters. Kind of like real confetti, you're throwing it. Now we put it back up here and we get something that's very much like that. And that's what I want. Okay, let's get rid of this. We don't need that. The next one to do, of course, is the balloons. Now you could probably go online and find pre-made party symbols that already have your balloons and your streamers and things, but the purpose of this is to show how to repurpose what you already have. So let's take this bomb and drop it over here. We're going to rotate it so it doesn't look so much like a bomb. It looks more like a balloon with the streamers coming down, and we're going to give it a nice gradient color. So what we're going to do is have 4 balloons. We'll have a red, blue, green, and yellow balloon. Okay, so let's go to our text. Let's go to gradient, and I'm going to just get rid of all these and just start off with 2. Okay, so we'll make this one red. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to make that red. I'm going to just move it down here. And then I'm going to click in front of it and make that one a light color. So basically I'm just using 2 colors. In this case, pink, red, pink, red. So I'm going to take this one and move it up here. And I'm going to click in front of it and I'm going to make that one pink. So what you have is light, dark, and then I'm going to click here and I'm going to make that a light color. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stops. So we're going light, dark, space, light, dark, and then light. Okay, now the trick here is to change your gradient type. So we want to go to radial. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at these. We don't want the center one. We're going to just see which one of these looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. And we just kind of click on this. That looks pretty good too. And we just see which one looks good. We don't want a stripe like that really. So I think that one looks pretty good. And we can just play with these, move them around. And we just want to make it look 3-dimensional. So that looks pretty good. I think I'm pretty happy with that one. Okay, so that's number 1. So we take that. And all we have to do now is just change these to different colors. So let's say we want to do blue. So I'm going to click here. That's the light one. So let's go to a light blue. And let's click here. Let's go to maybe a darker blue. Let's go here to a light blue. Darker blue. And light blue. Okay, so that's number 2. Now let's say we want to make a green one. And that's number 3. And let's do a yellow. And we have that. Now what we're going to do is flip some of these around. So let's say this one here. I'm going to go to Format, Rotate, Flip horizontally. We don't want them all facing the same way. We can rotate them like that. Now these little sparkles that come off, don't worry about those. They actually look pretty good. Okay, so we're kind of rotating these so they're not all quite the same. And we'll flip that one. And we have something like that. Now what I like is for the balloons to be the length of the letters so that we don't flip them vertically, so these streamers don't go up. So what I think I'm going to do is just spread them out a bit more. Okay, so that should be pretty good. So they should be at least the length of the letters. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to just move this over here. We're going to copy that. Now I'm going to click on this. That's our top layer. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of the confetti. That's the shape. Get rid of that. And I'm going to take this. I'm going to copy that and paste that into here. So again, I'm going to copy that. I'm going to click in here. Go to my text, clipboard, and we tile that. And we have something like that. And then we put that on top. And we have balloons. And if you want, you can actually move them left, right. So if you feel that you need to move them, they can be moved over. We can flip them horizontally. Vertically is not going to make all that much difference because they're the length of the letters. And that looks pretty good. Let me just move this over. We're almost done. Now the last thing I'd like to do is I'd like to have this nice glow that goes around it. And that's really easily accomplished. Now this is not the glow from this, okay? So it's not this, where you go to your effects and using the glow. That's not it. Because that glow only gives you one color. You'll notice that each letter has its own glow, and that's what we want. Okay, so to accomplish that, I'm going to just take that. And what I want to do is put that rainbow gradient in here. Go to gradient. We have that. We want to make sure we're going the same way. So we got red all the way to purple. So we want to make sure it's doing the same thing. Now I'm going to get rid of the outline. Don't need the outline in that. Now, all I need to do is copy and paste this as a picture. And then we're going to use our picture effects to create that. And picture effects has a nice blur. Now, if I just copy this as it is and paste it as a picture, you're not going to quite get what you need. And I'll show you why. Okay, so I'm going to go to Format. We're going to go to Artistic Effects. And we have a blur. It's right there. We click on the blur. Looks pretty good. Now, in our panel here, we control it. So let's drag a big blur like that. And you can see what the problem is. If you just do it that way, you get the square with a blur. That's not what we want. We want the blur to expand out and eventually disappear, but we don't want any hard edges on it. So how do you accomplish that? Well, you've already done that. I'm going to show you that. Okay, so we take a rectangle. We draw a rectangle around this, and we're good with the fill. And what we can do is line them up. So we go to Format, we go to Line, Center, Align, Middle. Okay. Now, obviously, we don't need the outline. No line. And then we just select everything. Okay, so now we got a big piece. So now we can make a really good blur. It can spread into this rectangle. And I'm going to just move it up a bit. We're going to copy that. We're going to paste it as a picture. So there it is, our picture. You can see the space all around it. We don't need this, so we'll get rid of that. Give us some room. Okay, so again, you can see that with that rectangle included, we got a lot of space to expand the blur out and make it fade to the end. So let's go to Format. Let's go to Artistic. Let's go to Blur. And again, we have our radius here. So we're going to make it a really big blur like that. Looks pretty good. And we're going to take this and we're going to send it to the back. So we're going to go to Send to Back. And we're going to just put it behind. And we have something that looks like that. Now the last thing I'm going to do is take this top layer. Actually, I'm going to get rid of the outlines on these layers. And what I'm going to do with this one, I think, is maybe make a white outline so it stands out. So let's go here, let's go to white, and let's make it maybe a little thicker. And there it is. We have Celebrate. We have confetti, we have streamers, and we have balloons. And everything's done in layers so that you can control them individually. There's your balloon layer, there's your streamers, and confetti layer. So again, if you keep them separate like that, you have better control of it. Looks pretty good. Let's put that back. Okay, so there it is. We have 3 layers here. That way we can control everything separately, and it looks pretty good. And you can always add a drop shadow on that. So if you felt that you needed a bit of a drop shadow to make things stand up, well, you got 3 layers to work with, so you can apply drop shadow to whatever layer you want. Well, it stands out a little more. I might make the color a little bit lighter, more into like a gray or something like that. So it's there, but not that strong. So again, you can play with all that too. Okay, so anyways, we kind of went on a bit longer than I expected. So that's how you can take smaller text and symbols and use them into nice patterns for your text. So hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you got something out of it. If you did, give us a like, and we hope to catch you on the next video.